Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Katz, and welcome to Tuesday's edition of WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle, where we tell it like it is. Friends, Inside the Trojans Huddle is a game-like panel discussion that is posted each Tuesday during the season. The huddle features WeAreSC columnists, staff writers, and historians. We first start off with the pregame show, where we introduce our panel members for this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle. All right, let's meet the guys. A WeAreSC columnist who writes WeAreSC.com's Monday Morass, Yay or Nay, and Sunday Takeaways. In addition to regular season football and basketball reports, he also hosts his own podcast show entitled Locked On USC. Marc Kulkin, the editor-in-chief of WeAreSC.com, columnist, national recruiting guru, producer, and moderator of WeAreSC's 4 Downs and 5 Things video shows, a graduate of USC, Erik McKinney, a former William Jewell College defensive back and WeAreSC columnist who writes the popular WeAreSC column, Musings with Arledge and Musings with Arledge Solo Video Edition, a graduate of the USC Law School, Chris Arledge, and a weekly WeAreSC columnist who writes Fridays, The Obvious and Not So Obvious, IMHO's Sunday, WeAreSC.com's travel guide, and an active member of the Football Writers Association of America, your moderator and producer of Inside the Trojans Huddle, Greg Katz. Folks, if you enjoy WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojan Huddle, we thank you and strongly encourage those of you watching on sites like YouTube to click the like and red subscriber buttons. It's greatly valued, appreciated, and it is free. You can also listen to Inside the Trojans Huddle on most available podcast sites. And friends, speaking of WeAreSC.com, we're offering first-time subscribers unlimited premium access for just $1 for a month and $74.99 for a full 1-year premium subscription. You really won't want to miss USC football's premier website. It really does tell it like it is. All right, let's kick this baby off. Inside the Trojans Huddle, we start off by evaluating the new number 5 in the country, USC Trojans. They had a 56-10 victory over the Stanford Cardinal on Saturday night in the Coliseum, before an announced Coliseum attendance of 67,213. So here we go, panel. Your assessment of the Trojans' offense against Stanford. What and who stood out for you? We begin, as always, with Marc Kulkin.
Hey, so I don't know. Is there a better offense in college football right now that's playing better than USC and Caleb Williams a quarterback? Because, you know, that would be a hard argue if you're going to go with the field on that. Caleb's not even played a full game. He's nearly perfect with his stats. A little hyperbole there, but anybody who's watched him play, he's looked pretty good. What you take away from this game is if Lincoln Riley wanted to be a jerk, he could have left Caleb Williams and the first string offense in, and they legitimately could have probably gotten close to 80 points. That offense was doing what they wanted, how they wanted, when they wanted, at whatever pace they wanted. It was one of the most impressive halves of football I saw on offense. And I've watched a lot of USC football over the years. I've seen that USC UCLA 50-0 score. I've seen USC put up 66 points on UCLA. You know, people can go back to that 55-24 USC Notre Dame game and back in 1974. What we're watching right now is revolutionary. To see how easy the game is for Caleb, that's scary. And he wants to be better than last year. And he's making it look like, you know what, he might do that. Because I understand the competition hasn't been the greatest. He's still making this game look too easy. And man, that's scary.
Erik McKinney, editor-in-chief of WeAreSC.com. Thoughts?
They were one Mario Williams cutback from maybe a perfect first half on offense. I mean, it's probably not that 2005 out of the gate against Arkansas, where I think it was 4 touchdowns in 8 plays or something. But again, Stanford is not a great team. They have a couple players on defense, especially in that defensive front. The USC offense for a big chunk of that first half made it seem like Stanford did not have anybody playing defense, let alone a couple guys who are pretty good. It was surgical, it was clinical, it was for a big chunk of those first 30 minutes as good as it gets. It's interesting because then you want to talk about the second half, and that was not good offensive football from USC. The starters did not play. I mean, they came out at halftime and it was like, collect the helmets. You guys are not going back in. So it's a different team that you're talking about in the second half. And yes, do you take your foot off the gas, and the backups should be playing, as well as they can. And that was let down, but there's no place for that in this, right? This was about the starters coming out and absolutely putting it all over Stanford with, yes, the best half of football that USC has played under Lincoln Riley since he's been here.
Chris Arledge.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's not only the best half of football since Lincoln Riley's been at USC, but one of the best I've ever seen at USC. Stanford's not great, but look, at this point, almost nobody is playing teams that are great. I mean, go look at who everybody else is playing. Ohio State didn't look very good. Michigan was very mediocre. Oklahoma was lousy against their opponent. Clemson was, I think, tied with that ridiculous team they were playing in the third quarter. So you can say, well, big deal, it's just Stanford. But yeah, but it was 49-3 at halftime against Stanford. And USC was they were every bit as good as I thought they could be this season. And here's the reality. Nobody's going to stop this USC offense unless they stop themselves, or unless somebody is so strong up front that they're just blowing up plays. And even if you do that, Caleb Williams is still going to make some plays. But if you can't do that, if you are not consistently whipping USC's offensive line, you don't have a chance. USC has Deuce Robinson playing garbage time minutes. Deuce Robinson is a freakish talent. He's probably going to be a top 15 NFL draft pick in 3 years, right? You don't see guys that are 6'6" with arms that long who are that fast, who can get up and high point the football. Those guys don't come out every year. That guy is an absolute freak. He barely plays. That's how good this USC offense is. You have the best college quarterback I've ever seen. He does everything and he makes it look easy. You now have explosiveness in the offensive backfield, which USC did not have last year. They have it now. Marshawn Lloyd is every bit as good as I hoped he would be. He's fantastic. And not only is he strong and quick and fast, but he'll run down and he'll run down 30 yards and make a key block, right? That kid's fantastic. Zach Branch is freakishly good. Lincoln Riley hasn't even pulled out a play for him yet. Now, that's coming. And if I were Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame, I would be frantically trying to figure out how that's going to be set up, because it's coming. He hasn't even done it yet because he doesn't have to. He has one of the great talents you're going to see in the open field. And it's like, we'll throw him out there at slot. He'll be our number 5 receiver. And if he's open, we'll throw to him. But since everybody's open, we're not going to throw to him all that often. I mean, it's an unbelievable collection of talent that is playing extraordinarily well and is coached by probably the best offensive coach in the nation. Unless somebody has an incredible defensive line, they don't have a chance. Not a chance. I don't care who it is. Georgia, if Georgia wants to slow down the USC offense, they have to blow up the offensive line just about every down. Because if not, they don't match up with USC either. Nobody does. Nobody matches up with this USC offense. It's the best group since 2005. And because Caleb Williams is substantially better than Matt Leinart, and I love Matt Leinart. I love me some Matt Leinart. But Caleb Williams is a different animal. It's probably a better group than 2005.
Well, I before we went on the air here, I was trying to get a pulse of different analysts across the country, and I came across Joel Klatt, and he questioned whether USC isn't the best team in the country at this point in time. He thinks the offense is every bit of what you guys all said. His question, as it always has been from the start of the season, which we all probably support, is what about the defense? It was his assessment that in watching the game, that SC's defense is on the verge of being actually good. And his response is the same as most people have said. Even if it isn't good, as long as it's effective, SC is going to play against anybody. Let's put it that way. So my feeling on it was frightening how good Caleb Williams is surgically using every potential option that he has when the ball is in his hands. I mean, some of his pitches out to wide receivers when he's running. I mean, two things struck me. So I think it was Branch or somebody was running around the near sideline, and Caleb is trying to be the lead blocker. I mean, I wish he wouldn't do that, but it shows you his competitiveness. And what does that signal to his offense? Our quarterback's willing to look for a spring, a block, and then what does he do on his own touchdown run? He just runs right into the defensive back and knocks him backwards to get in the end zone. I mean, it's just mind blowing if he's not the Heisman Trophy winner. I don't care what Shedeur Sanders does, the rest of them. I'm sorry. Caleb Williams is a freaking freak. And I am very hard to be impressed by anything and anybody at this stage of the game for me. But boy, I'll tell you, he is magnificent. Now, we touched on the defense, so let's move over to that side of the ball. Panel, your assessment of the Trojans defense on Saturday night against Stanford's offense. What and who stood out for you? Mark?
I thought they made significant improvement from week 0 to week 2, especially from week 1 to week 2 for using the college football calendar. I know everybody's saying, well, they gave up 200 yards rushing to Stanford. Okay. When you kind of peel back the layers a little bit, the backup quarterback led the team with 16 rushing attempts. Their leading 2 rushers as far as yards was Casey Filkins and EJ Smith. They each ran the ball 5 times. Casey finished with 63 yards. He had one run that went for 50. So those other 4 runs weren't doing a whole lot. And then the same thing with EJ Smith. He had a total of 53 yards, and one of them was for 20 or 29. I can't remember off the top of my head, but the rest of his yards were, just average. Stanford had no passing game once Ashton Daniels went out. The way USC's defense right now is playing is what we've all said throughout the preseason, off-season, now into the season. They don't got to be right. They just got to get better, tackle, and get the ball back to the offense. And that's what they're doing right now. The secondary gave up no big plays. It looked like they were able to successfully cover a tight end. They kept WeAreSC to 4 catches. He was a non-factor. So as far as I'm concerned, yes, Stanford is learning a new system. Their starting quarterback got knocked out early because USC is showing some physicality on defense. Everything's starting to come together. Now they got a bye week. Anybody who's dinged up, injured, or whatever the case might be, they get everybody back, hopefully fresh, healthy, when they come out to Arizona State. So right now, you don't want to say everything's perfect, everything's great, but you're starting to see some improvement on the defense. They're creating turnovers. And, players who we talked about on occasion, like Solomon Byrd, he looks like he's going to be an all-conference player at defensive end right now. They're getting production from the rush end. What was missing last year? Production from the rush end. So those are the improvements that we're seeing. And I'm sure Alex Grinch is going to be running up to the microphone on Tuesday after practice to kind of say, hey, look, we can get the job done. So we'll see.
Erik?
Yeah, good points and points where you're still kind of, to be determined down the road. This was a defense that, again, against Stanford early on, you had Stanford's first, what is this? 5 drives go 16 plays, 16 yards, 8 yards, 12 yards, -5 yards, and 32 yards. The next time the USC defense takes the field, it's 35-0. And that's what they've done to the Stanford offense at that point. It's difficult to stay revved up in the red line at a game where you're winning 35-0 before you've really had to do anything. So the yards, the big plays, that kind of stuff, you're a little bit understanding of it. Bottom line is it's still happening, right? It's still happening. It's still, and Stanford kind of went back to what we saw a couple years ago over the previous staff, that fly sweep motion, getting outside and beating linebackers out there. And Alex Grinch kind of says that. He's like, anytime you give something up, everyone saw that. Everyone on your future schedule saw that. And they're always going to try something like that to see, is that really an issue? So USC is absolutely going to see that again. Can they fix that? Gave up another, I'm not going to call it a deep ball, but a shot where a corner was trailing and couldn't make the play to bat it down. So there's some things in there where you're still thinking, okay, what happens against the better teams? But what really jumped out to me in terms of the positive is they absolutely knocked Stanford around. They pushed them around. They hit them hard. Right. You don't root for guys to get hurt, but you knock a quarterback out of the game. That says something about kind of what you're doing defensively. They hit him. They harassed the quarterback. They pushed the line around. There was a presence up front. Max Williams and Bryson Shaw played really, really well. Kalen Bullock, after kind of I don't think he was great against San Jose State, has put together 2 really good games in a row. What you want from him. You mentioned Solomon Byrd. So the positives far and away outweigh the negatives. And I don't know if you're going to get the same after the first 2 games kind of nationally. When you would hear commentators talk about USC, it was very easy to follow everything with, yeah, but that defense. I think that game changes it a little bit to where you're starting to hear, hey, maybe it's not, yeah, but that defense, maybe there is something there. It definitely gave you a hint of that they are good enough. I mean, if they play like that, that's good enough, I think, to beat every team coming, provided you get that offensive display every time they go out there. So again, a great step for the defense. You're just not going to be able to complain about a lot in a 56-10 game where you ran the score up that quickly and that assertively.
Chris?
Yeah, the defense is getting better on a weekly basis now. They're getting better. You look at the Nevada game, and even though it was Nevada, you say, okay, the defense played well, and there were plenty of times last year where USC played against lousy offenses and didn't control them. So you at least felt good that USC could control somebody, even if it was a bad team. With Stanford, you still have a bad offense, but Stanford can recruit some guys. I mean, that's a good tight end. Emmitt Smith's kid's a pretty good player. I mean, it's not like Stanford doesn't have any talent on the roster, and USC absolutely annihilated them. Eric mentioned it. You got great play from the safeties. That was the best safety play we've seen at USC in years. Kalen Bullock is an All-American, is playing like it. And Max Williams and Bryson Shaw. Bryson was killing some dudes out there. I mean, he was lighting people up. You watch it and say, okay, now I get it. I understand why Grinch wanted that guy. They were fantastic. Solomon Byrd is the most improved player on this football team. He is consistently playing well at this point, and he's becoming a problem. And I think USC is going to get substantially better everywhere else as the year goes on. You think about it, USC, they didn't have their best linebacker in this game, who I think will be their best linebacker, right? Mason Cobb didn't play. Gentry is not full speed, I don't think, and he's not playing all that much. So you have 2 guys that have hardly played, both of whom are playing pretty well and are athletic. But look, Tackett Curtis and Rayshawn Davis are going to be much better in week 10 than they are now. Just from the reps and the experience, they're going to be dramatically better. Bear Alexander is going to be dramatically better. That kid hasn't played a ton of football. He's a sophomore who didn't start last year. I mean, he has not played a lot of football. He is freakishly athletic and big and strong. He's everything you'd want. He's going to get better. The corners are going to get better. So I look at it and I say, this is not a defense that's going to look like Pete Carroll's 2008 unit. They're not going to be that. They're not going to look like Georgia's unit. I don't know that it matters, because you know what? Georgia's offensive unit is not going to look anything like USC's either, right? Night and day difference. The question is, can these guys, they're going to give up big plays. The corners are going to give up big plays. They're on an island all the time, and they're young, and they've shown that they're going to give up a big play from time to time. That's going to happen. USC is going to give up long runs. They're not getting beat on consistently in the run game. They're not giving up 8 yards, 7 yards, 6 yards, 8 yards. It's not that. They play pretty well against the run most of the time, and they give up 60 yards. And they do it every week, and it's frustrating, and I hate it. It's just going to happen. We're just going to have to make peace with it. Colorado is going to have 2 or 3 long plays against the defense. They're just going to. The question is, though, whether USC's defense is good enough to compete with the good offenses, because I think very few of the opposing defenses will be able to compete with USC's offense, right? It's going to be a brutal mismatch on that side of the ball. So can you get a few stops? Can you hold a team to 30 points? A good team? I think they can. I think USC can hold a good offense to 30 points. And if you score 30 points against this USC team, you are going to lose, probably by multiple scores. Right? I mean, at some point, USC's offense is going to have a bad week. Caleb Williams is going to be a little bit off or something, right? That's going to happen. They'll put the ball on the carpet. They'll have some penalties. That sort of stuff happens. So I'm not saying they're going to score 45 every week. I'm saying they're going to score 45 every week, but probably one. They're just that good. So is the defense good enough to do what they need them to do? Yeah. Honestly, I think they are. And I think they're going to continue to get better as the year goes on, because so many of the key players just don't have a ton of experience. And the guys that do have experience are already playing well, and I think we can count on them. So, yeah, I feel pretty good about it, actually. I don't know if I'd put them number one, but I'd say this. If USC played Georgia tomorrow on a neutral field, USC has a legitimate chance to win that football game. And that's not something I would have said last year.
Well, what I liked about watching the defense from the press box was the communication. I thought at times early in this season, it was like 11 mutes were out there, but they were really talking. You could see it. They're pointing. They're animated. You know, when I was at Edison High School, and I know that we do have some Edison players from that, those 2 CIF championship teams that watch the show, which we appreciate. I remember the late head coach, Bill Workman, we were standing side by side during practice, and we were talking about what it takes to have a great defense. And Edison at the high school level had great defenses. And he said, every defense, and I'm going to clean this up, so I'm just going to give the first letter of the word. Every defense needs 4 Ds on defense. He says, because they set the tone for the other 7 guys. And I was looking, okay, Bear Alexander, he is really into it. You can take the first 2 games, throw him out the window. He is into it. You can see the leadership he's bringing. He's maybe the best since Mike Patterson at nose tackle. He's completely disruptive. Jamil Muhammad is amazingly good. He is one of those players that you talk about who has really brings it. And his enthusiasm, it shows. Tackett Curtis, he learned from last week's ejection, don't do that again. But let's face it, you know, he is a enforcer there, and he's getting better and better. I'm not going to mention everybody. There was a couple of guys that said, you know, if they don't play better, they're not going to play. No matter what their reputation was coming out of high school. But I really felt that this defense is together. I think they sense, and listening to some of the comments, they're excited to get that Trojan offense on the field. I would imagine that if I'm a offensive coordinator for a team of playing SC, I would be panicked not to give up the ball and to move the ball against SC's defense. Because once SC's defense, as I think we saw against Stanford, smells the hunt, they go after it, and they're very, very difficult to get off the mark. They're playing with great enthusiasm. To me, that's a beginning of a good defense. Now, special teams, what did you think? Who stood out for you, Mark?
Nothing. Next question. Look, Zachariah. Here's what stood out to me, and I think we looked at each other in the press box after. Why are you even considering kicking and punting to Zachariah Branch? If you're kicking off, just let USC start at the 35. You're probably going to be better off. If your guy can't put it out at the back of the end zone, and that's the one thing Stanford was able to do with Josh Carty, is make USC start at the 25 when they kicked it off. There are 3 times in the game. But man, don't punt. Do not punt to them, because not just Zachariah Branch, Michael Jackson, he's capable. We talk about the guys who are willing to block. This team is unselfish. If you're not going to, USC's defense, that's actually another weapon. If USC gets off, can get the opposition off the field, they might not even have to put their offense back on the field. So there's another element to this team right now. Yeah, Zachariah Branch, he's pretty good. And Michael Jackson III is give him a crease. He might not want to take a backseat to anybody.
Eric?
I mean, Branch is obviously the story. SC had 2 holding penalties on punt returns and took one away. So the special teams in every phase is better than it was last year, clearly. I don't know what the numbers end up being at the end of the year, but at this point, it's better across the board. And I give Lincoln Riley credit, because that was one of the first things he said when he talked about kind of building the roster and bringing guys in. He said, when you add the depth that we want to add, one of the first places you're going to see it is on special teams, because you're going to have better players across the board covering kicks, blocking on returns, all of that stuff. I think we've seen that so far. I can understand Stanford punting to Zachariah Branch. He's a true freshman. He got loose on that kick return. You assume that your coverage teams are better than San Jose State's coverage teams, because San Jose State's coverage teams last year were terrible. I will not understand any team going forward punting or kicking to Zachariah Branch. It makes no sense anymore. And I do think Lincoln Riley was right when he said, he's a true freshman. He took one back. You don't want to give up before the game starts. You got to give up now. You can't challenge him by just letting your punter kick it 60 yards downfield and hope that you can bring him down. So that changes the game and shifts things. Even if he's not returning it, we've talked a few times about when another team comes in and has to spend that much time on special teams and trying to figure it out and telling their punter, you can't do what you normally do. You got to do this stuff. You win that battle kind of before the game starts. And if you mess up and you give him one, he's going to take it back. I mean, his speed, his elusiveness is just different, to the point where when he gets a crease, he's extending, going away from the guys trying to chase him. He's not it's not like he gets free and you wonder if he can take it. If there's any kind of crease, he's gone and nobody's catching him. So he's been unbelievable. Dennis Lynch keeps piping home those extra points, which is all you want him to go out there and do. And the coverage teams have been good. I just, through 3 weeks again, it'd be great if Michael Jackson III had a punt return touchdown to his credit right now, and the penalties, you gotta get rid of those. But this was not a strong special teams team last year. They are, at this point, looks like they could be very well in that plus territory when it comes to special teams.
Chris?
You guys remember that Colorado Notre Dame national championship game? I think it was the Orange Bowl in 1990. Eric may not, he's too young, but the rest of us probably remember it. Where they kicked it to Rocket Ismail. He ran it back for a touchdown. There was a holding penalty that brought it back. I was thinking about that because not only because Zachariah Branch reminds me a lot of Rocket Ismail. Look, if you're a young Trojan, first of all, if you're an older Trojan, just that name probably makes you feel a little bit of fear. But if you're a young Trojan, go check out Rocket Ismail on YouTube. You tell me whether or not he doesn't look like Zachariah Branch. It's the same thing where every time he gets the ball, it's like, I'm pretty sure this guy's going to score. And if you tackle him, it's shocking. I bring it up, though, because they kicked to him. Rocket Ismail is a junior. The weird thing about football coaches are that football coaches actually talk themselves into, well, you know, we've worked on this. I like my coverage unit. I believe in these guys. I think that, you know, if we directional kick and we pin him on the sideline, people are going to kick to him. Not every week. Not everybody's going to be stupid, but there will be some people that are stupid. So that's number one. He's still going to get a chance to return kicks. Yeah, we're going to see a lot of shanked punts by teams who are scared to death to kick it to him, as they should be. But we're going to see some coaches that are stubborn. I'm going to nominate Kyle Whittingham because I know how stubborn Kyle Whittingham is. I think Kyle Whittingham's going to talk himself into, you know, we're disciplined, we're tough, we're good tacklers, and that'll be Zach Branch's next punt return touchdown against the Utes. But so number one is he will get some chances, and when he does, he's otherworldly. Michael Jackson's a really good football player. I was thrilled to see that return. But it's different. When you watch Michael Jackson return the punt, you say, that's a good football player. That kid can run. Nice cut. Good job. When you watch Zachariah Branch, you say, holy smokes, he may not be human. Now, I have a message for the punt return team at USC. Don't hold anybody ever. Ever. What do you think that guy's going to do? You think that guy's going to tackle him in the open field? Don't hold him. Look, the likelihood that the way you're going to stop Zach Branch is you're going to kick it really high and you're going to have a bunch of guys around him and he's going to make the first two guys miss and then you're going to tackle him, right? That's what's going to happen when you stop him. But that one guy that you're trying to block, if you screw up and don't block him, just let him go. It's at least a 50-50 shot that guy's just going to fall on the ground, lose his jock. I mean, it's stupid to hold for him. Don't do it. By the way, that's almost true for Caleb Williams at this point, right? If don't miss a block and get Caleb Williams hurt, there's nothing that would be worse than that. But you know what? If you miss a block, there's a good chance that guy's not touching him anyway, right? He's not. I mean, you saw it last year when you'd have the backside edge rusher come through clean and wouldn't even get a hand on him. Yeah, Caleb wouldn't even see him. He just know he's there and he just kind of twist around. The guy'd fall down. When you have spectacular athletes like that, don't hold. That's the only thing I have to say. Otherwise, I feel pretty good about our special teams and the likelihood that USC is going to continue to get great field position seems to me to be pretty high.
Well, I think you guys covered it all. I would like to just throw in the punter, Eddie Chaplinsky. He had 5 punts, 42.2. What I was impressed with, 3 of those punts were inside the 20-yard line. And sometimes, you know, Eddie gets lost in the shuffle of the special teams, and well-deserved for Zachariah Branch. But the only thing I'll just conclude with this is, once again, Mark said it, Eric said in the press box, Chris said it, but I'm going to say it. Why any coach kicks to Branch is beyond me. It's a macho thing with coaches. Nobody does that to us because we're better coach and yada, yada. But it will be interesting to watch what happens in the future.
Even on the punt team, you don't want to outkick your coverage because the more space you give Zach, you're just creating more open field. So you're better off just saying, USC, you're going to start where we kick the ball out of bounds.
You're right, but there's going to be somebody that's going to continue to do it. We'll see. Fans, ever been caught up in a last-minute event ticket frenzy? The stress, the uncertainty? It's crunch time. You don't need it. I know the feeling, but guess what? There's a game-changing solution, and it's called Game Time. Imagine this: effortless ticket buying for all of your favorite sports, music, comedy, theater, arts, events. No more frantic searches. Game Time is your ultimate ticket buddy. That sounds good to me. Want perks? Well, how about incredible deals on last-minute tickets and a rock-solid best price guarantee? Say goodbye to ticket anxiety and hello to the sheer joy of being in the moment. Now, just because the Trojans are on the road for 2 straight weeks following this week's bye, if you are planning on going on the road with the Trojans, having trouble finding tickets, check out tickets for upcoming away games at ASU, Colorado, and Notre Dame, respectively. Check out remaining USC home games while you're at it with Arizona, Utah, Washington, and UCLA on Game Time. Now, aside from USC, you can also head to Game Time for tickets for the Dodgers, Angels, Rams, Chargers, tickets to all your favorite LA teams, and don't forget the great concerts as well. Flash deals, easy access, seat view images, unbeatable best price guarantee, event protection. Game Time has it all, from sports to rock concerts. So here's the deal. Head to gametime.co, that's gametime.co, C-O, not .com, and download the app, create an account, use code TROJANS for $20 off your first purchase. Ready to dive in? Well, as for buying the tickets, easy as tapping on your phone. Tickets are sent straight to your phone. Again, download the Game Time app, create an account, use code TROJANS for $20 off. Terms apply. Create an account and redeem code TROJANS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Second quarter, here we go. Panel, this week the Trojans have a bye week, the first of 2 bye weeks, the second one coming after the final regular season game against UCLA on November 18th. Panel, your overall assessment and analysis of the offense after the first 3 games. I know we touched on it, but reflecting on it, is it surpassed what you thought it was going to be? Is it where you thought it was going to be? I don't think you're going to say it's underachieving, but Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I actually thought this is what we were going to see. I mean, Caleb Williams was unbelievable last year, but Lincoln Riley was talking about the fact that, he'd only started for a year and a half and he'd get better. And I think he is better now. He's so comfortable back there. The offensive line has played well. I thought they would, but I think that's a group that's going to continue to get better too, because they haven't played a lot together. So they should continue to improve. And there's just so much talent around him. I'm pleased by Marshawn Lloyd. I thought he would be good. I think he surpassed my expectations. I think he's actually really good. I'm thrilled to death with the way Taj Washington has played. He was a good player last year. He's a different player this year. I mean, he's exceptional. And so I don't know. I mean, you look at that, you look at the offense and you figure that an offense that talented with a quarterback that good, that experienced, with a play caller that good is probably going to dominate every week. And that's essentially what we've seen. So, yeah, I think they've sort of been what I expected them to be so far.
Mark?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot to really add to what Chris has said. The best part about this is, and we've all said it already, they're only going to get better as the year goes on. You're talking about Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams pretty much being able to read each other's mind. Caleb Williams knows that, hey, you know what? I probably shouldn't do this. I'm going to do it anyways because I know what needs to be done in this situation. So let's take a chance here. Like that 3rd and 1. He knew he shouldn't have thrown the deep ball, but he threw it anyways and said, everybody knew that Stanford wasn't a threat in the game. So it's like, let's see what happens if we gamble at this point. I don't know if there's a whole...
I'm sorry, Mark, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, there's just not a whole lot more that we want to say about this offense because, one, who they've gone up against to this point, but when you watch them play, you see how much ease there is in what they're doing. If they want to run the ball, they're going to run the ball 5 yards a clip. If they want to throw the ball over the middle, they're finding guys over the middle. They want to create open space, but the slot guys, they're doing that. The offensive line is probably the one area where we need to see more improvement, and what Chris talked about. If they start to if they stop rotating as much and just let the starting 5 play, I think we'll be okay there too. Caleb Williams is going to cover up any deficiency you might have. If the opponent's defense gets into the backfield, so what? He has it in his mind where he knows how much time he has, when to step up, when to step back, when to step right, when to step left, when to take off, and then when to just get rid of the ball at the right moment. This offense, we talked about in the first quarter, unless the opponent's defense can get to Caleb Williams and get him to the ground, you don't have a chance to stop this offense. And when you look at their schedule, there is nobody on their schedule that is going to stop this offense. So let's just enjoy the ride.
Erik?
A couple of things stand out for me. The bad news, I think Gino Quinones going down is a big hit to this offense. Again, if you can roll out your 5 starters, and there's still that Michael Tarquin, I think is the clear starter, but then Mason Murphy really close behind him. He keeps coming in like every third series or so to play there. But losing Gino from the center of that line is big when you look down the line. I mean, there were games last year where USC would kind of randomly not have a Justin Diaz available. And then obviously the way the season ended without having Brett Nealon or Andrew Voorhees available, Gino was a big piece of that depth there in the middle. So that immediately makes it interesting and puts a lot of pressure on, talking about a true freshman in Alani Noah, maybe Andrew Millick's a guy, Killian O'Connor we saw play backup center. That puts a lot of pressure on those guys to be the guy if you need to go to them. The offensive line looks the way we thought it would look, right? The 3 transfers have fit in at those 3 spots at guard and at right tackle. And the 2 guys coming back, Justin Diaz, a couple of hiccups here and there. Jonah Monheim has been standing at left tackle. So that to me is the key. How well is the offensive line playing? How well can they play going forward? How much depth can you establish there? I think that last part is going to be really interesting. I think at the skill positions, it's been what we expected it to. The biggest question we had coming in, Jordan Addison, when he committed to USC last year, it was clear he is the guy. He is going to dominate targets when he is on the field, and that's what happened. The expectation for this year with the wide receivers is who's going to be that guy. Doesn't matter. Do they need a number 1 guy, or can you spread it around? At this point, you have 6 players with between 8 to 10 catches. You have 4 guys averaging at least 23 yards per catch. It's insane. Austin Jones has been the least effective running back. He is averaging 7.6 yards per carry. Marshawn Lynch is at 7.8. Quentin Joyner is at 8.1. What do you do if you're a defensive coordinator? Oh, we have to take away this guy. And the list of this guy is like 14 names long. So that's what really comes out, is that you can put anybody anywhere, do anything with anyone. And how do you attack it defensively, other than, like Chris said, if you can get to Caleb Williams and hit him within 2.5 seconds of him getting the ball, that's how you have to defend this offense. It is coming from anywhere. They've shown that Caleb Williams can make 2-yard passes while he's running and standing next to the receiver. He can hit Brendan Rice for a 75-yard deep ball on a shot where they kind of telegraph and say, we're going to hit this play during this game. We need to find the right spot. And they found it and did it. I mean, it's crazy. It's the offense is unbelievable. I think, again, if you want to sort of say, but it's that Gino injury and how quickly can you get to a 7 or an 8 or that's probably the cap, I think, at this point. Offensive linemen, where if you need to in South Bend, if you need to go to them or anything like that you can. But no, I mean, with the skill guys, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I think the offense is better than I thought it would be, because the players that have returned, the skilled players, are better. At quarterback, he's just better. Caleb is just better. You cannot defend him running, passing. We already know that. What I like is they're throwing to the tight end. I thought Lake McCree is becoming more and more an option. And And mark my words, somewhere, some game at the biggest moment, Jude Wolf is going to catch a touchdown pass, and he's going to be a big factor because everyone's going to go, "Who is that guy?" But he's playing now. But the fact that Lincoln is throwing to the tight end is kind of where I think we all wanted to see it go. Obviously, he thinks that he's doing that. They're recruiting tight ends, but they're just better on offense than I thought they would be. Now, switching gears, we're fourth this way in the season. How about this defense? Your overall assessment, are they as you thought they'd be? Are they better than you thought they'd be? What do you think, Chris?
So I think they're what I expected them to be at this point. I did think this was a defense that was going to be much improved because I thought they'd be better up front. And I thought they would probably dominate the first few opponents just because the first three, no, let's throw Arizona State in. They're the first four. The first four are terrible. And I figured they'd handle those guys just fine. They have some major challenges coming up, right? I mean, you looked at it and you said, okay, well, in 5 of the last 6 games, they have big time challenges. And now with Colorado becoming a real threat offensively, at least, you now look at six of the last 8 games, you're playing against offenses that can light you up if you make mistakes. And they're going to get lit up a few times. That's going to happen. The truth is that would probably happen to any defense playing in this conference. I mean, I really think that if you took Georgia and you put them in the Pac-12 this year, they're going to give up 30 a bunch of times because there's so many good quarterbacks and so many tough offenses. But I think they look. Bear Alexander is what I hoped he would be. Kyon Barrs is solid, which I hoped he would be. Bird and Muhammad are better than I thought they would be. So yeah, I mean, I feel pretty good about this defense, but don't kid yourself. They're going to have some rough days, and not because they're bad. I don't think they're bad. I think they're going to be pretty good, but they're going to have some rough days because this schedule is about as bad as it gets for a defensive coordinator, right? It's just terrible. Every week you're going to face somebody who can play, except the next game. You're not going to play anybody that week that can play. But after that, this guys who can play.
Mark?
Yeah, they're what I was hoping they would be. And that's better than last year and getting better as each week goes along. Chris touched on some of the players. We've all touched on them. They're getting production at positions that they weren't getting it at last year. And that's part of Alex Grinch's scheme. Getting pressure from the edge. Jamil Muhammad has solidified the starter's role. Solomon Byrd, he was playing rush end last year. He's playing defensive end this year with his hand in the dirt, and he's doing a hell of a job. He's getting to the quarterback. He's knocking quarterbacks out of the game. He's getting sacks, forcing fumbles. Chris mentioned the safety play earlier in the show. Or maybe it was Eric. They look better. They're playing their assignments. Bryson Shaw is healthy. He's knocking people out, at the sideline. As long as they don't make mistakes, give up the big plays, they're doing their job. Get the ball back to the offense. We knew they weren't going to create as many turnovers as they did last year. Season's still young. They're on the plus side now. As long as they maintain the plus side and tackle, this is all you need from this defense. Get off the field, get the ball back to the offense. And that's what they've done so far. They made Stanford tried to run an up-tempo. That wasn't successful. Stanford was kind of forced to do things that they weren't comfortable doing. And if USC's defense can force you to do something you're not comfortable doing, you're doing a good job.
Mr. McKinney?
They've done what they've needed to do so far. I think they've shown what they needed to show. They are absolutely leaps and bounds better in the front six along that defensive front, and they had to be that. You couldn't bring in that many transfer portal guys, true freshmen, and really address that group and not show significant improvement there. I think that's big. You have got some quarterbacks coming up down the road, and again, I know we're talking about what we've seen so far and not what might come later, but the corners are going to get challenged. They're going to get challenged in a big way down the line. The question that I just don't know if we're going to have an answer for until we see it. And maybe it's all the way at that Washington game. I don't know if Notre Dame is a huge challenge there with the combination of quarterback receiver. I mean, it'll be the first one. Colorado, certainly you're going to get a little bit there. That's going to be where you really get a sense of can they hold up. The two spots like Mark talked about that you got not enough from last year, and Lincoln Riley talked about that a lot, the nickel spot and the rush end spot. And right now Jalen Smith is playing well, leading the team in tackles. Jamil Muhammad is playing well, 2 forced fumbles, a couple sacks. So you're getting more of an impact from those spots. And if you can have, I mean, a guy like Stanley Taufo, so much was put on him last year to be the guy in the middle. You can see when he can share a little bit of that, when Bear Alexander's in there, when Keon Bars is in there, when you have those guys, he plays well. I mean, and you're seeing that from a lot of the defensive guys. When it's not all on them, the way USC did not have enough depth last year, that took a toll as the season went along. So I think you're seeing what the depth can do, and you're seeing what the new guys can do. I think you have to be pleased with what they've done so far. It's not, report card's not due yet, right? You still have the tests coming up.
I'll just say this: they're where I wanted them to be. The jury is still out in a lot of respects for me, because as you mentioned, the biggest challenges for this defense is awaiting them. I want to see what happens when they get knocked down a couple of times. I want to see what happens when they go up against a really good offensive line like Notre Dame has. How do they respond? It's going to be how this team responds. You can always look great when you're beating up on less talented teams on offense. How do they respond? We'll get a little shot of it. Arizona's got when they come back to play Arizona with Jaden Daniels, then they'll go right into Colorado. And they're going to have to break the will of the Colorado offense. I heard today Mel Kiper of ESPN said that if Shedeur comes out in 2025, he'll be the #1 overall draft pick. People will be talking about him like they're talking about Caleb Williams now. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but I want to see how they react to it. Now, we pretty much talked about special teams. Probably simple answers here. Chris, are you happy with what you've seen in the first quarter of the schedule from the special teams?
I mean, I'd like to find a return man, but other than that, I feel pretty good about it.
Mark?
Yeah. Well, I'm not even sure what we're supposed to say at this point.
Erik?
Yeah, I mean, the questions are still there in terms of, can you hit a deep field goal when it matters? And are you eventually going to get burned when you're not hitting touchbacks, at a huge rate? So those are two things where I don't know if we have the answer yet. The coverage has been really good, and the return options that you have give you an advantage going into every single game on special teams. USC did not go into maybe any game last year with what looked like a clear special teams advantage. That's not the case this year. So again, we're talking about Lincoln Riley kind of flipping a roster. This is his second year. Those are big steps on special teams too, just like we've seen offensively, defensively.
Yeah, and I'll just wrap it up by saying we need to find out, does Dennis Lynch have it when the game is really on the line, fourth quarter? is he going to be able to kick that field goal? That's important. Can Eddie and his punting pin him back inside the 20 when it really counts? So there's still challenges ahead, but I think by and large they're better than they were last year.
But none of that has anything to do with these past 3 games, is what we were supposed to be talking about. I don't think anybody anticipated Dennis Lynch having to kick a long field goal under pressure against any of these teams.
No question.
So we can say what if, but let's worry about that what if. I don't even know if USC is going to be in a position to be in that position at all this year. Everybody's talking about Shedeur Sanders. I saw a different game than some other people because Nebraska made him look kind of pedestrian. Nebraska finds a quarterback, they win that game. But
he's not Caleb Williams.
He's not anywhere close to Caleb Williams.
Look, he's going to be a challenge. Travis Hunter is going to be a challenge. That little running back is going to be a challenge. Colorado's offense is a problem. But he's not Caleb Williams. Look, USC is going to need to kick a field goal at some point. I mean, everybody, no matter how good you are, you're going to have a game that's going to come down.
I don't think they're going to need a 48-yarder from him at any point.
Well, hopefully not, because I'm not convinced that that's his range, but we'll see.
Well, a reminder to all USC football fans, following the conclusion of each and every USC football game, home and away, WeAreSC.com brings you 5 things, an immediate analysis and response from WeAreSC Editor-in-Chief Erik McKinney and columnists Marc Kulkin and Greg Katz. The trio answer and discuss 5 important in-depth questions about the game just concluded. If you want to see it, and immediately, as soon as it's taped from the press box of wherever we're at, go to YouTube. That's the first place you can go. And then, of course, on WeAreSC.com site. So, with that, let's move on. Halftime. Panel, do you think that this week's bye comes at the right time, Erik?
No, it comes at a terrible time. Terrible. I mean, I know that the week 0, the Notre Dame, all of that stuff changes your Pac-12 schedule, and all the other Pac-12 teams are still playing non-conference games. I would love to get Oregon or Washington or one of those teams right now. I think that USC is more competent and put together than one or two of those challenging games that looks like at the end of the season. I'd absolutely roll the dice with USC going and playing one of those games right now. That run of games that you're going to have without a bye for the rest of the year, I think the bye week this week, it hurts USC in terms of the rest of that schedule. I think that they are at a place right now where you don't want to stop playing. I mean, what they've done offensively, what they did defensively this last Saturday, like, you want to be on the field on Saturday. I don't think the injury situation is anything where you're going to get a huge benefit from having the bye right now. And if they're in the championship, right, if they're in the Pac-12 championship game, then you like having that week off before there. I think that you're more likely to get to the Pac-12 championship if you could get one of those teams now and have that bye later in the year.
Chris?
Yeah, Eric's right, of course. It's a terrible time for a bye. I mean, I'd like to have a bye after Notre Dame and before Utah, or after Washington and before Oregon. I mean, there are all kinds of times when USC is going to need a week to sort of heal up and get ready. I don't think they need to heal up and get ready. I mean, nobody has to play very much these days. So, no, it's a terrible time. But, you know, it's one extra week for the young guys to get a lot of work. And fortunately, unlike in years past where the young guys get a lot of work during the bye week, but you didn't have a lot of game film on them, this year you have a ton of game film on all those kids. And so, you know, they're going to take a step forward, and USC is going to need some of those guys, particularly on the O-line, where you're probably going to need Noah or Page to play some this year. So, you know, it's not any bye week is useful, but no, when you go through that run USC has and you don't have a break, you're going to want a break somewhere. But they'll have to survive it, I suppose.
Mark, how do you feel about it?
You know, I'm in agreement with these guys. If we do have to have an early season bye, I would maybe have preferred it after this first road game, going before USC has to head to Colorado, because Colorado plays Oregon before USC travels into Boulder. So just to have that week off, watch that game film, and really just focus in, that would probably be the only change I would make as far as having the early season bye. And Erik made a great point. You know, if USC gets to the conference championship game, that late season vacay is going to feel just fine, because that's when players who are dinged up, they're going to want to have closer to 100%. They're going to get that extra time to use the ice bath and the other types of medicinal treatments.
If I had my choice, I'd put that bye between Notre Dame and Utah, because of the physicality of the Notre Dame game. We don't know what would happen physically, and then you have two physical teams like that in a row that could catch up to you in some shape or form. So I would prefer that it had been later myself. Panel, Carl Williams, the father of Trojans All-America quarterback Caleb Williams, said recently that Caleb might be better off returning to USC for one more season rather than be drafted by the worst team in the NFL. Do you believe that Caleb might return for one more season if he doesn't like his NFL draft options? Erik?
So I don't, with the transfer portal, with NIL, with all the changes going on in college football, I don't like to lock into anything and say there's no chance or it's definitely going to happen. So I'm going to leave that as it's possible, but I don't think it's probable. My read on that is it's far more about what you said last. If he doesn't like his NFL draft options, I think this is more about changing that to where he does like his NFL draft options. And so there's a clear message to whoever had number one pick. It would be best if that ended up with this team or this group of teams. That's sort of the way that I'm reading that. But he is going to go into that draft. Right, John Elway had baseball. I think Caleb Williams might have the most leverage of any potential number one pick when it comes to the NFL draft, because he can come back to USC and make $15 million, whatever it is, in that year playing at USC or not playing anywhere. I mean, I don't think that he's the kind of guy that would take a year off and go to that length, but he is going to have a tremendous amount of leverage. And my read again is this is potentially the start of that whole process that's going to be really fascinating to watch how that plays out. But it's clear that there are a group of teams in the NFL that I think any quarterback who wants to go and have success probably doesn't want to end up on out of his career. But it's also tough because if you're going to go to number one pick, whoever wins the Super Bowl is not going to draft number one. And whoever has a really good quarterback and a really good team probably has that quarterback already. So it's an interesting thing going on there. But that's my read, is that it probably ends up more with getting into an advantageous position when he does go to the NFL.
Chris, is this an option? What do you think?
Well, it wouldn't be completely unprecedented. I mean, Peyton Manning came back for his senior year when he would have been the number one pick after his junior year. It does happen sometimes with quarterback more often than with other positions. I don't think it's likely to happen this time. I think that Erik's right. This is primarily about leverage, and Erik's absolutely right that he has more leverage than anybody's ever had. Because you think about it, what is it that Caleb Williams wants? He knows he's not going to go to a good team. A good team wouldn't have the number one overall pick. But there are some franchises that are notorious for consistently making terrible decisions. There may be some coaches that he doesn't want to play for, right? There are some situations that are really bad. And I think Caleb Williams is going to be able to avoid that, because it's a very simple conversation between him and whoever has the number one pick. He's going to say, listen, I don't want to play for you. I don't like your franchise. I don't like your coach. I don't like the decisions you've made. I don't want to play there. So you have two choices. You can trade down to number 2 and probably get 2 first-round draft choices in exchange for that move downwards. And you can draft Drake May or whoever the next quarterback is on the board. and have a couple of really high draft choices in the coming years. That's option number one. Option number two, you can tell me you're going to draft me anyway and refuse to trade down, in which case I'll go back to USC. I'll make $15 million, and then I'll come out the next year. You're still going to end up drafting Drake May, but you're going to draft Drake May without the 2 draft choices. So it's really up to you. And in years past, quarterbacks may say that. I mean, John Elway used baseball. Eli Manning, I think, just threw a temper tantrum to get his way, and it worked. But nobody had the sort of leverage that Caleb Williams has. Caleb Williams could make as much next year playing for USC as he would being a rookie in the NFL. And that, yes, that pushes off by 1 year his second contract. But if that extra year is a year where you made $15 million, it's not like it's a terrible financial decision. And so he has a believable threat, and his father is already starting to lay the groundwork for that, which is really smart. So no, I don't think he's going to come back again. I think he might be bored if he came back again. The truth is, I think the college game has gotten too easy for him at this point. But I do think that threat is going to be significant, and he'll probably be able to push aside the franchises he doesn't want to play for. And it does matter. It does matter who you get picked by. And as good as Caleb Williams is, he could end up in situations that really harm his career and make it where he's not the player that he wants to be. And that hurts him not only financially, but I think in a more important way, Caleb Williams wants to go down as one of the great quarterbacks of all time. He said that. He needs to be in the right situation. I think he has the leverage to force himself into that situation. And a GM that's foolish enough not to listen to him may very well get that Drake May and no extra draft choices and Caleb Williams goes back to school scenario happen to him, which if you're a GM in the NFL and you pull that off, you might as well just fire yourself because you're done. So it's smart what he's doing, but USC fans, don't get your hopes up. This is the last year. He's not going to be opening up that LSU game for us.
Mark, are you getting your hopes up?
No, but look, this Caleb's father speaking in the magazine, talking about this, it was done on purpose. There's not a whole lot more to add to this. They were putting it out there. This is what it's going to take if you want Caleb Williams playing on your team next year, whether that's USC or whether it's the number 1 pick in the NFL. You're going to pay, and you're either going to pay to make sure that you put the right players around Caleb Williams in the NFL, or if you're USC, we like the NIL deals you put together so far. Show us what you can do. We have them come back to try and win a 3rd Heisman and a 2nd consecutive national championship. It's just stuff to talk about. It was done on purpose. Otherwise, Caleb Williams doesn't get up there and say, I don't want to talk about this. You don't have your father going to to a men's magazine and lay that out there if you didn't want that information public. They're smart. They're not dumb people.
Well, I think that Caleb Williams, that's a card that he could play. I mean, it seemed like last weekend, it seemed like every commercial was Caleb for Nissan House, Caleb for Wendy's. And I'm kind of amused that Matt Leinart is kind of, I hate to use this term, it's probably inappropriate, but on the coattails of Caleb Williams and the Wendy's commercials, I believe. And then you have a couple others. It's just, he's amazing. There's two parts of Caleb, the football player, the off the field personality. I mean, this guy's got it all going. And I think the thing that, whether he comes back or not, I think the most impressive thing is the way he's handled it so far on the field. He's living up to everything. It's not easy, I would have to think. Now, for those of you viewing Inside the Trojans Huddle, we strongly encourage you watching Inside the Trojans Huddle on sites like YouTube to click on the like and red subscriber buttons. It's greatly valued, appreciated. Again, it's free. And you can also listen to Inside the Trojans Huddle on many available podcast sites. And be sure to check out WeAreSC.com to become a premium subscriber. All right, we kick off the 3rd quarter with the lightning round. Folks, in honor of the Trojans going to the Big Ten in 2024, We kick off the third quarter of Inside the Trojans Huddle with our Big Ten lightning round. Panel, answer the following statements with a brief comment if required. We'll go in this order: Mark, Erik, Chris, and myself. So here we go. Question 1, yes or no? Were you surprised attendance for Saturday night's game, USC and Stanford, was under 70,000? Mark?
I was surprised that they didn't announce that it was 70,000 because it looked like it on TV. It looked like it from the press box.
Erik?
Yeah, same thing. It looked significantly more than the 62, 63 that they've announced for previous games.
Chris?
Not surprised and not disappointed. They'll sell out the last 3 games this year.
I was surprised but not disappointed in the crowd's reaction. It sounded like there was at least 70,000 there. All right, question 2, yes or no? Trojans' first half against Stanford was the best first half of the Lincoln Riley era. Mark?
Yes.
Erik?
Yep.
Chris?
Yep.
Agree. Question 3, fill in the blank. The best Pac-12 city for restaurants is Mark?
I haven't even seen this question yet. I'm going to say the best press box is in Boulder, Colorado.
No, it's the restaurant.
I understand. I
The press box. Okay.
I don't have one.
I get you. For those of you that aren't obviously in the press box, they have a tremendous barbecue chicken. It's by far the best in the Pac-12. Erik, what's the best city for restaurants?
Greg's already walking to Boulder so that he can make sure that he's there in time for the press box meal. So the best Pac-12 seed, we have to choose between Corvallis and Pullman for this, right? Am I reading this correctly? It's Los Angeles.
Let's be clear. The best Pac-12 city for restaurants is.
Aren't you checking the news, Greg? There are only 2 teams in the Pac-12. A judge
That was a little above my
today. So
at my age, that was a little over my head.
Yeah, it's Los Angeles. It's not close, right? Yes.
I would have said the Bay Area 5 years ago.
Chris?
Yeah, you can make an argument for San Francisco, assuming. I know that neither one of those teams is actually in San Francisco. Seattle's a good one too. Seattle has some good choices, but the answer is probably Corvallis.
All right. I was conflicted, San Francisco or Seattle. I left LA out because I looked at it as someone who would travel with the team to the different cities. So I picked San Francisco. I like going to the wharf, seeing and going into Sausalito and in Tuberon. So that's my take on it. Question 4, fill in the blank. If I could have dinner with one living Trojan or a Trojan from the past, who would it be? Mark, who do you want to have dinner with, living or in the past?
Man, there's so many names. Sean Cody. I think he'd be a fun dude to eat with for some reason.
Erik?
McKay. Joe McKay.
Chris?
Greg Fertig, maybe a close second.
Okay. Chris?
I'm going to give 3 names. It's not a date. It doesn't have to be one-on-one. I'm going Louis Zamperini, John Wayne, and Will Ferrell.
Wow. Okay.
That'd be a good night. I'd invite you too, Greg, if there's a 5th seat, but I don't know if there will be.
Well, I would suspect I wouldn't be invited. For me, John McKay. Question 5, fill in the blank. The best tailgating for a Pac-12 stadium is where, Mark?
If you can take away the driving in and the driving out, it's the Rose Bowl.
Erik?
I don't know. I honestly don't do a lot of stuff around stadiums before the game. Washington's the bay and the boats and all of that kind of stuff. That seems pretty idyllic when you see photos of that.
Chris?
Both good answers. I'm going to go with the Rose Bowl with the same caveats that Mark gave. I'm not picking Washington just because the weather's always so bleak there.
All right, I was torn between the Rose Bowl for the reasons given and Washington. I'm not a big gate guy, but When push comes to shove, I would say the Rose Bowl. That's a hard place to beat. Question 6, fill in the blank. The worst weather to watch a football game is in the rain, the snow, or the heat. Mark?
I've done all of them, and it is by far the heat. It sucks. We just found out 7:30 p.m. ASU.
So it'll be down to 97 degrees. Is that what we're hoping for?
We're hoping for.
Eric?
Yeah, it's probably the heat when it's just brutal. Although sitting at the USC Notre Dame game, I think it was 2010. I don't like calling it the Ronald Johnson game, but it's the best way I can describe it. That rained a lot, and I was absolutely soaked sitting in the stands. And that was, I guess maybe it depends on what's going on in the field, right? All of those things maybe are enjoyable when you like what's going on in the field. But for this answer, the heat is rough. Again, I don't love 7:30 kicks, but it was mandatory that Arizona State kick was 7:30 coming up.
Chris?
So I played college football in Kansas City. If you ever watch a Kansas City Chiefs game late in the season and you see what it looks like, it is painfully cold. Not huge amounts of snow, although it snows. But the worst experience I've ever had at a football game is one I played in, and it was whatever the slightest temperature rise you have to have in order to keep the rain from freezing. That's what the temperature was, and the wind was blowing at least 30 miles per hour. And I got to tell you, I played in a game in Hawaii where it was 120 on the field, and that was awful. But that was nothing like this game. It was so horrific that even right now, as I'm just thinking about it, I mean, it didn't help that we got beat 28-0, but just thinking about how cold that was and all the things I was trying to do just to stay barely alive on the sideline where we're waiting for our offense to go 3 and out. It was horrific. So I'm going to say that really cold rain where it's not quite freezing, there's nothing worse than that.
Well, I tell you, I've been in Lambeau Field in December, and it is brutal. I've never been in that cold. It was like peeling my skin off like a potato. And I hate the heat. I don't like the heat. I don't like going to Palm Springs, what have you. But given the choice between the two, which isn't much of a choice, I don't want to be in the heat. I can't take the heat. Question 7, yes or no? Have you ever paid over $300 for a ticket to attend a college football game? Mark?
No.
Eric?
No.
Chris?
I don't think so. Just for the ticket, I've certainly paid a lot more than that to go places and watch, but I don't think I've paid more than $300 for a single ticket.
I have not paid $300 for a single ticket to see a college football game. Question 8, yes or no? Before the Trojans take the field before kickoff, the celebrity tunnel runner leading the men of Troy onto the field should be limited to a former USC football great. Yes or no, Mark?
Sure, I'll plant a flag on that hill. Yes.
Eric?
No. Cheryl Miller was awesome.
Chris?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think it should be an athlete or somebody whose stature is so high that you can't dismiss it. Will Ferrell coming out of the tunnel, completely legitimate. Cheryl Miller is completely legitimate, but otherwise, football player is the right choice.
Yeah, I agree. Former football player, but exceptions like Will Ferrell, I would agree. Question 9, yes or no? Since the Trojans have announced they'll be playing in the Big Ten in 2024, have you been paying more attention to the Big Ten this football season, Mark?
More attention? No, same. I pay attention to it.
Okay. Eric, have you been paying more attention to the Big Ten than you have in the past?
Not really. My second team for a while has been Northwestern. My wife went there. We have a bunch of friends that still live out there. It has been to put it mildly, a rough year for the Wildcats. So no, not paying quite as much attention to them, but I think right? The big teams, kind of the trends. You want to get kind of up on what to expect for next year. I think so far it seems like a lot of the same from that conference.
Yeah, to me, I don't say that I'm not paying more attention to them because the same cast of characters seems to repeat itself every year. But, maybe later in the season when things become more defined, Penn State, so on. Question 10, yes or no?
Greg, how did you know that I didn't have a very good answer to that question?
I skipped over it because your last question, I know, took a lot out of you. I thought
Yeah.
it was cool. What?
That was
Okay,
my bye
so
week.
I
It came at just the right
apologize.
time.
I apologize for that.
No, it's fine, Greg. I'm not going to say anything now. I took the bye week right before this next big question. It's fine. Let's just move on.
All right. Do you, Chris? Come on. Do you
I'm not
follow?
going to answer the question, Greg. Just move on.
Oh wow! What an
Yeah.
attitude. Question 10: yes or no? In the final year of the Pac-12 as we know it, the 2023 Pac-12 champion will make the postseason college football playoffs. Mark?
Yeah, it's going to be USC.
Eric?
I don't want to say no just because that's what I know of the Pac-12. It's so ingrained that it's going to start out so well and then absolutely collapse at the end of the year. But I'll say yes. Because I think that it's so good. It's such a good conference this year that we should already have it plugged in that whoever wins the Pac-12, a one-loss team, even maybe a two-loss team,
What were the two teams this year, right?
Gets the benefit, right? Well, for so many years, right? The SEC was like, oh my gosh, look what we did at a conference. Look at all these ranked wins we're going to have in conference. We should have two teams. Nobody ever pitches that for the Pac-12. The Pac-12 right now, I don't know if it's that close, is the best conference in college football right now. This is about the time where you start talking about, oh, should two Pac-12 teams get into the college football playoffs? So I'll say yes, because it should, kind of no matter how the rest of the year plays out, because these are good teams out here this year.
Chris?
It should happen, but the problem is there's so many good Pac-12 teams that you could see the conference champion having two losses. And if they have two losses, I don't think they're in. I mean, nobody's ever gotten in with two losses. So I think the answer is yes, because I think USC will make it through with one loss or less. But I mean, look, it could happen. You could see USC with one loss playing a Washington team with two losses and getting upset in that game, and then I think the Pac-12's out of it. So I don't think that'll happen, but it's not crazy.
All right, I say yes, and I think there's two variables in this. I think for all the reasons you guys have already said, but I think that the Pac-12 is going to be a sentimental choice, and what an embarrassment that would be to the people that helped destroy it. And plus, you can't leave out the Caleb Williams factor. That would draw viewers. So I think they're in an excellent position to get somebody into it. Now, bonus question. Phil, movie I have ever seen is Mark. What's the best movie you've ever seen?
Breakfast Club.
All right. Eric?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the best, but certainly the go-to for me is The Big Lebowski.
Okay. Chris, the movie buff.
Eric's the dude.
So the best movie, I think the best movie I've seen is The Godfather. But there's a different question, and that is, what's the movie, if it's on TV as I'm flipping through the channels and I see that it's on, will I always stop and watch? And there are two answers. There are two answers that it's not one of them. There are two answers to that question. One is Top Gun, and the other is Tombstone. I will always stop and watch if those movies are on.
All right. And I will complete that question by saying the best movie I've ever seen, Ben-Hur, going back to the Charlton Heston days. If I, like Chris, if I see it's showing, but I've got a copy of it anyway on DVD, and I just love watching the whole thing. Now, before we begin the fourth quarter, this is a very special lighting of the ceremonial Coliseum torch this time, because I know, because in the press box, this, oh, come on, you're not lighting? Give me a break.
Uh-oh, that would be a tragedy.
It would be a tragedy.
One shot of gas.
There is a wonderful woman who passes statistics out each and every game, and she leaned over to me and said, you know, I really like it when you light up that symbolic torch.
That conversation did not take place.
Okay, now, excuse me, councilman or counselor. It did take place because Eric was sitting right next to me.
Yeah, Eric, really?
Yeah.
That happened?
She did.
Okay, well, I'm sorry to hear it, but let's move on. I don't need.
Like, I'm trying to get out of it now. If you raked me in the coals beforehand,
Well,
on you, and now you got embarrassed because the great.
I'm not embarrassed. No, I am embarrassed because if that's a
You
part of
should
the
be
show that people
embarrassed.
are looking forward to, that does not say much for the rest of what we're doing here.
For what it's
Well-
worth, she leaned over before she gave Greg the compliment and said, I'm gonna make Greg feel good. Watch this.
Oh, okay.
Chris, I can't believe that you asked a witness a question that you didn't already know the answer to. You really
Right.
put yourself out there on that.
Right on, brother.
Yeah, well, there's
Chris
no,
is
that's
usually
fine.
right, but this-
We'll move on. There's this incredible slate of games we're going to talk about.
Okay,
It's
look at how he tries to
easily-
change the subject, but
No,
we're going
it's
to move
easily
on with
the
it.
most- no, Greg,
In
just-
the interest of time. All right, here we go. Fourth quarter, bell. Here we go. Predictions. We're going to ask you to predict the winner from ranked Pac-12 teams, and we are not going to do a national game of significance this time because there isn't any. But that being said, Saturday, September 16th, we'll just go unanimous on this. Weber State at number 12, Utah, 11 a.m. Pac-12 net. There is no point spread on this game, and we all know why. So we're all in agreement that Utah. There we go, deafening.
Yeah.
San Diego State at number
Greg's
16.
fuzzing out. The answer is that the Pac-12 is going undefeated this weekend.
All right. Well, in the
You
interest
know,
of
the best game nationally is Tennessee playing a really bad Florida team. This is the worst week of college football all year. It's horrible. Next week, after this, amazing week. This week is terrible. There's not even a game worth talking about.
Well, for protocol and those that want to know when a game is and what channel's in, we're
You
going
don't come to us
this
for that
up.
information.
San Diego State at number
People have
16.
smartphones, Greg.
12:30
It's
p.m.
not like somebody's sitting around saying, I wonder when I'll be able to watch San Diego State and Oregon State. Maybe I'll catch
It's coming.
Inside the
It's coming. Hold
Trojans
on.
Huddle.
Hold on. It's coming.
Oregon State is favored by 23 points. North Carolina Central at number 24, UCLA, 2 p.m. Pac-12 Los Angeles. UCLA will win that game. We're all in agreement on that. University of Northern Colorado, all right, at number 23, Washington State, 2 p.m. Pac-12 net in Washington. We're going to agree that Washington State takes that one. Number 8. Okay, now this is one that you're going to have a pick here. Number 8, Washington at dysfunctional Michigan State, 2 p.m. Pacific time on Peacock. Washington is favored by 14 points. Chris, is that going to happen?
The game, they will play it, and Washington will win it. This,
Okay.
by the way, was a thrilling 3 minutes of Inside the Trojans Huddle. I mean, at the end of the year, when they give out awards, I think this is the portion of the episode that everybody will point to is really the highlight of the season.
Mark?
Yeah, I'm gonna keep my Emmy nomination in my back pocket for this episode. Washington will win. I don't know if they cover.
All right, Eric?
Yep.
Washington will win. We'll skip this one. Hawaii, number 13, Oregon, 5 p.m. Pacific time, Pac-12 networks. Oregon's going to kill them. Colorado State at number 22, Colorado, 7 p.m. ESPN. Colorado is favored in this one. We are all in agreement. Yes.
That's only a 23-point spread. That surprises me a little bit.
Well, there you go. It caught your fancy.
Well, Chris, were you surprised that Nebraska or Colorado was only favored by as few points as they were over Nebraska?
I was also, but I also made a big deal of Utah being favored by so few over Baylor, and it turns out that I had no idea what I was talking about on that one. So, I still think Colorado State's been lousy. They're going to cover that game.
No, I agree. I was just curious because I was surprised by that spread as well.
No.
Yeah, as Chris mentioned, next week is going to be a lot of great games all over the place. So we'll try to get to the ones that matter. All right, here we go. Overtime, questions and answers panel. Time for to answer some viewer questions from the WeAreSC member message board. It's an open forum. Question 1 from Trojan from the Valley. Panel, it was an incredible first half and a great win against Stanford. However, the Trojans give up quite a few big plays that seem to have a very tough time stopping the run. Stanford had 209 yards rushing against us and the running quarterback, especially in the second half. Does this concern you moving forward? And will the return of Mason Cobb help contain the running quarterbacks we're going to see in the next 2 months? Feel free to chime in. What do you think?
Nothing that happened in the second half of that game concerns me in any way moving forward. That was a 30-minute practice to finish that game out. That game was the first half, and I think that's the lasting I guess knowledge that you need to take from that one for me.
Okay.
I talked about the running yards they gave up earlier in the show. It is what it is. They gave up 200 yards, but they weren't hurt by the running game. That's really what you want to look at, big picture. Were they hurt? No.
Chris, anything to add?
No.
Okay. Question 2 from Don, aka Trojan fan in Bama. How great would the playoffs be if these blue bloods made it? USC, Alabama, Texas, and Michigan, with USC versus Texas for a rematch in the national championship game, with SC getting revenge. How do you feel about that?
Alabama's not going to get there this year. They do not have a quarterback that's going to get them there. I mean, those would be great games, but I think any of the 4 teams that get to the playoff this year are going to be some fun teams to watch.
Yeah, first of all, this would be the right year to play Alabama, but if it's USC and 3 other teams, I don't care who those other 3 teams are. I'm happy.
Okay, question 3 from Freddie in San Juan Capistrano, California. I was disappointed that our last game against Stanford drew under 70,000 fans. What's it going to take to sell out the Collie? I'll just chime in quickly on this. The opponents, as long as SC's winning, it would not shock me. Actually,
What would help is if the bandwagon fans would show up.
what do you think, guys?
Well, you need to, and opposing fans too, right? I mean, Stanford fans weren't going to come out for that one, and the other 2 teams were terrible. The answer is Utah, Washington, UCLA. That's what it's going to take to sell out the Coliseum. Those 3 games. And
I agree. I think they'll show up, definitely. Question 4 from Jake in Ventura. Who's the biggest threat to USC losing a game, Notre Dame or Oregon?
It's Oregon, but it's 90% of that is the schedule. If those 2 teams were flipped, the answer is Notre Dame. They've got kind of more of a direct shot at Notre Dame. Oregon is coming after Notre Dame, Utah, Cal, Washington, and then you have the trip to Oregon. I think if those 2 teams were flipped on the schedule, my answer would flip. But that's it. I think at this point, Notre Dame's probably the better team. But I think based on kind of where they fall in that schedule, it's a tougher game at Oregon.
I agree completely.
Acceptable answer.
Agree. Question 5 from Connie in Arcadia, California. Where do Dr. Carol Folt and the new AD sit during the game?
In the president's box. And
Yeah, didn't they say that she's always on the sidelines? So watching the game, the athletic director,
end of the game,
I didn't see her this last game. Was she there on the sidelines?
they were both on the sideline at the end of the game.
At the end of the game, okay. Well, we got that cleared up. Question 6 from Nick in Altadena, California. Do you think that Rayleigh Brown will enter the transfer portal at the end of the season? I say yes.
I think at this point that's probably the guess. I think there's a long way between now and then, but I mean the the parallels to what happened with Gary Bryant Jr. Happening this exact same way, same position, slot receiver, wasn't the starter, kind of an or thing there. The touches at the beginning of the year, the way it was kind of like, yeah, he'll probably redshirt. The thought of like, oh, things could still change. I think the father in that one too said, no, we don't anticipate the transfer portal. We're going to do all of this stuff, and then transfer portal opens, he's in and at Oregon. Again, I'm not going to lock anything. Football has a number of ways where things can go now based on what players can do and all of that stuff. At this point, with him not being at either of the last two games, yes, right? I mean that has to be. I guess at this point, I hope not.
That's the difference between him and Gary Bryant. Gary Bryant was showing up to the games, putting on his jersey. Rayleigh's not showing up at the games. Connect the dots.
The disappointing part about it is that he's obviously talented enough that you would want him on the roster. But the truth is that if Rayleigh Brown is upset because he's not a go-to guy at either running back or slot, the reality is he's not good enough to be. He's not. I mean, Taj Washington is substantially better than he is. Zachariah Branch is substantially better than he is. Both of the lead tailbacks are substantially better than he is. And that's not that he's not a good player. He is a good player. It's just he's on a team with a bunch of really good players, and he's only a sophomore. Stick around, have a couple of those guys leave, and he could be a major factor next year. So it's disappointing to me that he thinks apparently that he needs to leave, but I don't know what Lincoln Riley's supposed to do. Who's he supposed to play him in front of? Which of those guys?
Question 7 from Morgan in Dallas, your area, Chris. I was wondering who decides who leads the team out of the tunnel before a game. In other words, who's the decision maker? I have no idea.
Morgan, I've got a call, and I'll let you know on our next show if I get an answer. How's that?
Caleb Williams, probably.
Well, he probably doesn't bother with it, but if he wanted somebody, it would happen.
You would think. Question 8 from Mason in San Pedro, California. Guys, we lost another big-time linebacker in Chris Cole from Virginia, who announced for Georgia. Panel, why do you think we lose a linebacker like Cole after he said such nice things about us?
Because Georgia wins national championships and fire hoses defensive players into the NFL. That's it. That's what Georgia has done. That's what these guys have seen.
I suspect he said nice things about Georgia too. He probably says nice things about a lot of programs. I mean, I don't know why anybody would be surprised that a kid from Virginia, who is a whole lot closer to Athens, Georgia than LA, would go play for Georgia that has the decent, the defensive resume that Eric suggested. This is not the USC coaches falling apart. It's not that recruiting's going terribly. They tried to steal a kid from the South who's a linebacker, and Georgia got him. Georgia should get him. That's the equivalent of there being a big time quarterback from Southern California, and somebody comes and says, "Oh, we didn't get him. He went to USC." Of course he did. It's not a problem. And by the way, what I think we've seen this year is that where Lincoln Riley needs to, he will go and find some guys in the portal and he'll plug them in, and the team's talent will be better than it was a year before. That's what's going to happen. I don't know who the linebacker is going to be. He'll find somebody and the kid will be able to play. It's just not, this is not something we need to be worried about.
Yeah, because and to Mason's point, asking, he said so many nice things. All the players say nice things. All the recruits are going to say nice things. Kingston Viliamuasa said nice things. Players have their reasons for choosing other schools. Period.
They're in it. I mean, SC's in it with him, right? Like they got in it. They're impressing these guys on visits. I know you get no credit for coming in second place, but in this transfer portal world, you kind of do. I mean, there are times where making an impact during the recruiting process and being that like second or third choice, that helps you down the line where some of these guys, they'll either talk to teammates or other players, or they end up in the transfer portal, and those connections you made, they help out big time.
Yeah, I think if you lose a player, you lost him on the first round. Doesn't mean you're not going to see him on the second round. So, and there was also that feeling that Chris Cole goes back to his area and says what a great time he had at SC, and other players that are from that area hear that, they're liable to take a trip out here. So, you lost the big prize, but you really have a chance to make some positives out of a disappointing announcement. And remember, it's still just, here we are in September. It's not signing date yet. So a reminder again, if you have a question or comments for our panel, go to the WeAreSC members message board, click on the thread that pertains to Inside the Trojans Huddle, viewer or listener questions. And once again, if you enjoyed Inside the Trojans Huddle, please click on the like and red subscriber buttons. We greatly appreciate your support, and be sure to check out WeAreSC.com and become a premium subscriber. Well, that'll do it for Tuesday's edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle. A reminder to watch 5 things on YouTube shortly following every USC football game home and away. And so till next Tuesday, when we preview the Arizona State game, the Trojans' first road game, and we'll preview all things USC football. A big thank you again to our great panelists, Marc Kulkin, Erik McKinney, and Chris Arledge. And a special big thank you to all of you for watching or listening to Inside the Trojans Huddle. Have yourself a great bye week. And until next Tuesday, this is your moderator, Greg Katz, reminding you all to fight on, everybody.